Business Focus with Kudzie Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.
Good morning and welcome to Business Focus right here on the Champions League Breakfast on Capitalk. As always, we have Kudzie in the studio. Good morning to you, Kudzie. How are you doing?
Good morning, Tinashe. Good morning, Patsani. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. So, Kudzie, let's we understand ZCon is happening in Victoria Falls. What are some of the takeaways that you have come across in ZCon? Maybe for the layman on the street, what does ZCon mean?
Thank you, Tinashe. So ZCon is just a Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference. Mm-hmm. So it is a conference that is being hosted by the Minister of Finance, where Zimbabweans, economists, captains of industry, and all like-minded Zimbabweans are gathering in the Victoria Falls to discuss matters of the Zimbabwean economy, how we can develop. And I think the theme is to do with resource mobilization. You know, Zimbabwe owes the IMF, in fact, it owes the World Bank and other international financial institutions, and more than close to 14 billion external debt that is owed to international financial institutions. And we are in arrears, meaning that when you are in arrears, you are not able to borrow anew. That's why we are trying to renegotiate so that we can have our debt restructured so that we'll be able to borrow again. So I think the theme of ZCon, which is the Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference, is mainly on resource mobilization. Where do we get resources to develop Zimbabwe? Do we go look for? I'm sure it's about looking for local resources, even from the informal sector. How do we harness the resources even from the informal sector so that we can develop the country? That is what is happening in Victoria Falls, currently underway. And yesterday was the official opening by President Mnangagwa. And for me, the key takeaways from that is that government seems to be listening, because yesterday, just before the president spoke, I think Permanent Secretary, the Minister of Finance, So Permanent Secretary in the Minister of Finance, George Guamatanga, gave a summary of the key takeaways from the previous day, which is on Sunday, that he was summarizing to the president. And when you then see him capturing some of the things that were said by the private sector, you would probably say, yes, government is listening, because they could have excluded the key points and just pick what they like to hear. So one of the things that was spoken about, things to do with inflation and exchange rate dynamics. And stakeholders identified inflation and exchange rate instability as a major challenge facing the economy, with potential to compromise medium to long-term economic growth prospects. And the scourge is negatively affecting mostly the poor and low-income earners. They also said the instability was identified as the mainly emanating from money supply growth, and which is feeding into exchange rate and inflation instability. So they acknowledged that it's the money supply growth, that's where the instability is coming from. And then government was and central bank was recommended to keep money supply growth and refine the foreign exchange towards a market determined to achieve the desired stability. So this was captured by the Permanent Secretary and the Minister of Finance to say fine-tune the exchange rate system towards a market-determined one to achieve desired stability, which means that they are, in a way, they are actually it's a tacit admission that the current one is not yet a market-determined exchange rate, because they wouldn't have captured, the Minister of Finance would not have captured this as one of the recommendations, because they would have just said, look, we are already doing this, or it's already in place. So capturing it like that means they are also admitting that maybe there's need to do that. And then also an interesting one that I also captured is that where they're saying to ensure value for money and curb corruption, both in public and private sector, stakeholders recommended innovative ways of adopting e-procurement management system that eliminates human interface and promotes efficiency. So we are in the digital economy, and this is what is being recommended, and hopefully it will be implemented. Interestingly, both President Mnangagwa and his lieutenants at the Ministry of Finance were also saying that the value for money initiative that they undertook last year, they managed to save about 30% of the budget. So, for example, they would have said we are going to spend 100 million in a particular in the ministry or sector, and then they were, because of the value for money, they managed to save 30%. This is what they are saying. So it shows you that in the past, maybe people were overcharging, overpricing, and government would just pay. But with the value for money now, they are really looking at is this product or service supposed to cost so much? If it's too expensive, then you look elsewhere. I think President Mnangagwa also said that there were some ministries that came complaining to him, saying that we are not getting enough from Treasury, and then the president said, this is what he said. He said, I asked George Guamatanga to say, how much are you giving them? And he said, I'm giving them 42 billion. And he said, okay, give me the $42 billion. And then the ministries were asked to say, okay, tell me what you want. For what do you require? And then I think maybe through the OPC, they then decided to supply to buy on behalf of the ministries, and they are saying they also managed to save almost like they bought. He said they spent a third of what was budgeted for. So he said they've done it for 3 months, and they are spending just 30% of what the ministry would have spent. So it's interesting. If this is what is happening, then this is what we want. It means that we are using national resources efficiently and without wastage. So those are some of my takeaways from ZCon, and hopefully some of the recommendations by economists, researchers, academics, hopefully some of those recommendations will find their way in the 2024 national budget.
But how is the appreciation of Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference in Victoria Falls by the private sector?
Look, I think there was. I've seen even some that have been critics, so to speak, or that have. That have not agreed with government in terms of policies. I've seen they are there in Victoria Falls. They are contributing, which is what we want, where those who have been opposing government policies, when they are called to come and sit on the table and discuss policy, they make themselves they avail themselves instead of just opposing. And when you are called to say, let's sit in one room and discuss these things, you don't avail yourself. So I think the private sector, to a large extent, has availed themselves, and they are part of the discussions that are taking place. Maybe the only challenge that will be there is in terms of implementation, to say what they would have discussed and agreed upon, are they implemented, or are they made part of the policy making in terms of decision making? But from what Treasury captured, because like I said, George Guamatanga, the permanent secretary, presented what his ministry had captured from the deliberations. And even the president, when he was before he started his speech, he said, from what you were saying, from what you captured, there are a few things which I think we can make into policy to promote economic development. So if they do that, then this is what we need as a country. We don't just want to be criticizing, but when we are called to then come and make suggestions, we should avail them ourselves. So I think from your question, the private sector was well represented is actually well represented in Victoria Falls.
Luve in Kwadzana says tiri kunzwa kurambirwa kurambwa kwema 50 Zimbabwean dollar notes per market. Are we not going to run into a risk of having another bigger denomination being issued by the Reserve Bank?
Yeah, and unfortunately, Tinashe, is that there isn't much out there in terms of these $50 notes. They are there, yes, they aren't that much. Muma Kombi and the like, achiri kungoshanda. I'm not sure I think maybe kuma tax shops, of which kuma tax shops kwacho anoshandiswa as change mostly.
But sometimes you actually get into I've picked up yesterday in Kombi kwenda kumba you ish out $1 for a change vanokutaura atitorina change 50 cents in Zimbabwean dollars.
Yes, there's a serious shortage of those notes.
Is that not going to put us into a situation where the central bank will be forced to print a bigger denomination?
Yes, if it becomes a crisis, then they might want to
will that not affect in terms of the rates and inflation?
Yeah, Zimbabweans being Zimbabweans, they always try to make to take advantage of that. If today the RBZ says we are printing a $500 note or a $1,000 note, no matter how helpful it will be to us, tinomhanya kutotanga kutoti inflation, they are printing money, even though malation inge print it's not even 1% of money supply. Like now it's less than 1%. Manotes are now in the economy, they are less than 1%. Saka nyango wakaprinta double aripo ezvinezvi or 5 times aripo ezvinezvi, do you think that will cause inflation?
Is it about the notes, or it's because there is a lack of confidence?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
But when I know that Tinashe can easily lose his confidence, and I will try and instill fear in you so that I manipulate you, and instead of demanding 1,000 notes, I'll tell you no rate up at 2,000. There are people who are there, speculators. They will manipulate the situation. They know that Zimbabweans do not have confidence. And so they will manipulate that. So we have got that people who are actually waiting out there to exploit whatever fears that Zimbabweans have. So that's why I'm saying to you, Tinashe, to say even if the RBZ prints 5 times what is available, 10 times what is currently available, even 50 times what is currently available, that should not cause inflation because it's less than.
The amount is insignificant.
Yes, it's less. It will still be less than 5% of money supply.
Okay. I've just always wanted to ask you this question because, like, for the past 2-3 weeks, have we dollarized?
The economy is largely technically, so to speak, it is dollarized because we are saying 90% of transactions are now in US dollars, right? But we still have when we say we have dollarized, it has to be something that is now 100%, and also it has to be something where government is now saying atishashandisa Zimbabwean dollar. That is not
right now. I'm quoting from what you were saying. You were saying the money that's been printed or the money that's in circulation,
yes, the Zim dollar
is close about 1%
of money supply. Yes,
of money supply. So I'm just saying, if the Zim dollar is about 1%, so it means we
not the Zim dollar, not physical, not
1%.
But we still have the Zimbabwean dollar, which is in electronic form. Yes, which is in electronic form.
Which is about, it constitutes to what percentage?
The last time the Reserve Bank spoke about the ratio between deposits, and I think it was 70-30%. So it could be 80-20% depending on value. Remember, Nenya exchange rate. So yes, we are in agreement, but we have got retailers, for example, official retailers, big retailers, who are telling us that of what they sell. And for example, one of them is OK Zimbabwe. It has got 70 stores, but 70 stores, 80% of their transactions are still in Zim dollar. Yes. So if you go to my rural areas, it's 100% dollarized. Autotenge in fact autotenge unotenga huku shida mbudzi shida mananga angori ma-US. So the rural community has akuna. So it's cash and it's US dollar cash, so they are 100% dollarized.
Besides the big retailers, like you said, as an example of OK Zimbabwe. Yeah, but if you realize that Makombi 50 cents inoshanda mako in Zimbabwean notes anoshanda if you are going for a distance that is less than $1.
Yes.
But when you're going beyond $1, ukamupa dollar in 4,000, for example 4,000 Zimbabwean dollar notes instead of a $1 note, anogona kutokurambira.
Yeah, anogona kukurambira because urungompa basa rekutakura manotsi akawanda. But mariyo iri easily changeable.
So can we safely say that
pamsika you've seen ukangosvika akangomira kombi yake pamsika angoti monzi ndikudawo maningirikini akutopiwa it's easily because ishoma saka ina chaino affect business.
But hatisi kuti here Kudzi kuti most of these then transactions ari kunowandira kuti ma US dollar ndo atiri kunyanya kushandisa within most of the transactions. But when it comes to the issues of salaries, people being paid, they are paid in Zimbabwean dollars.
Not necessarily so, Tinashe. We have seen companies that are now mixing 60-40 or whatever ratio. Some depending on which company it is. Some, for example, if a company is selling 100% in US dollars, they are also probably giving their workers 100% in US dollars, unless vari vanongoda kungodzvanyirira vashandi kuti anototora ma-US acho umanya unotenga mazim dollar kuti ape vashandi unobhena mazim dollar ma-US dollar kuti ape vashandi mari ari mazim dollar. But it just depends on kuti iyo company yacho iri kutengesa in what currency. So you have got a company like, for example, Zim Papers, the owners of Capital. Some of the adverts are paid for in Zim dollars, especially if they are government adverts. They are paid in Zim dollars, and some are paid in US dollars. So nongota so ratio yako, okay, I'm getting 40% of my revenue in US dollars and 60 in Zim dollar. That's also your ratio maybe when you are paying your workers. So that's what is happening in the economy.
Okay, just briefly, time is up now. Any highlights from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange?
Yeah, the stock exchange at the moment is in the positive territory. It's been recording gains in the last couple of days, and yesterday it was up by a significant 7.8% for the top 10 index, 5.23% for the all share index, and the top risers were NMB up 15%, Delta up 14.86%. Okay, Zimbabwe yakonzeresa but iri kutrade up 14.04%. And interestingly about OK Zimbabwe, today I saw Choppies also coming with almost exactly what OK Zimbabwe said about what's happening between the formal sector and the informal sector. It's almost like it's word for word, but this is not Choppies Zimbabwe. It's Choppies, the parent company, which has got operations in South Africa and Botswana, but one section yavanga wakati Zimbabwe, and this ndobva vanyorawo zvavari kufunga kuti chii chiri kuitika muZimbabwe.
But remember yesterday I said maybe other big retailers were waiting for a brave big retailer to open up their mouth, and then they'll also come behind.
So maybe that's what is happening, but we all know what is happening in the market. We don't even need OK to tell us what is happening in the market. Yeah.
All right, Kudzi, thank you so much for Business Focus. We'll speak more tomorrow right here on Capital.
Thank you, Tinashe.
Business Focus with Kudzie Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.